Clarity.SHOW podcast. I'm Karina, your host today. My guest is Rene de Daniel, Principal Enterprise Architect at SAP. In today's episode, we will be discussing SAP Enterprise Architecture Framework, how this framework helps to create solutions roadmap that address digital transformation needs and enables emerging technology adoption to support long-term business strategies. We will touch such topics as enterprise architecture tooling, predefined enterprise architecture consulting services, how this framework supports creation of roadmap for intelligent technologies, and successful story of an organization that has implemented SAP Enterprise Architecture Framework. René, before we'll start, I'll let you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Karina. Thanks a lot, first of all, for having me here in this podcast. So, as you mentioned, my name is Rene de Daniel. I'm working in Switzerland as part of the Business Transformation Service, accompanying major or big customers on their digital transformation journey and also applying the SAP Enterprise Architecture Framework.
Wonderful. So, René, what is SAP Enterprise Architecture Framework and how does it help organizations align their business goals with their technology infrastructure? What are its main cornerstones?
Yeah, so the SAP Enterprise Architecture Framework has actually 4 cornerstones. The one thing is about a common methodology which is based on industry standards like TOGAF, which we have adopted slightly to a certain extent in the SAP context. We have also selected the key artifacts which we see in custom engagements as being of relevant. And that's the first part, the methodology. It's also scalable, so you can run with it smaller engagements, but also big transformation programs, for example. The second piece to it is, and very important, is the reference content. So here we have 2 parts. One is the business reference architecture, and the other one is the solution reference architecture. So on the one hand side, you have references around, for example, capabilities and processes, still solution agnostic. So you can find your company strategy in there. And then the second part is the solution reference architecture, where we then close the link from process or capabilities over into our SAP solution portfolio. So you will find in there the respective solutions which we are proposing in a given context. The third component are the tools. So we have a set of tools which we can use to support our architecture activities. They act also as accelerators like the Signavio Process Explorer, where we get access to the reference content, but also other tools where we maybe have to look up specific services, where are they deployed, which hyperscaler is offering the services, but it could also be around more technical information around in which data center is a software as a service, for example, being operated. And then the fourth component, like you mentioned in the introduction, is a service portfolio. So we're also delivering services in order then to define, for example, roadmaps, target architectures, but also doing some assessments, for example, across the architecture landscape.
All right. So basically, there is a methodology which helps communicate everyone in the same language, which is based on the TOGAF. Then we have this reference to business solution architecture and system architecture. We have also toolings, and I would like to dive deeper into this topic. So could you share with our listeners some insights into the importance of enterprise architecture tooling? What are some of the key benefits that organizations can expect from using such tools?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the Signavio Process Explorer is one of our primary tools we are using. So with the help of that Process Explorer, and by the way, everyone who has an S user can actually freely access that tool. Maybe we can also share a link around that tool. So you can freely access the content of the reference architecture, and that actually helps you to speed up your architecture activities. So for example, many companies, they use their process models, but they also want to embark towards business capabilities on their enterprise architecture journey. So you could use now the tool and look up the capability model in your respective area of interest. So you can jumpstart the interaction with your stakeholders by leveraging, for example, business capabilities which are detailed down to level 3. Or furthermore, if you have a certain scope in mind, you can also use the tools because underneath there's a repository, so all the objects are kind of interconnected. And you could, for example, then derive a certain set of solutions which are supporting either a specific process or capabilities in order then to define your target architecture, where you want to understand, okay, what is the SAP perspective moving forward, what kind of solutions are proposed. We have also different models in there. If you're more in a hybrid environment or in a cloud deployment, then you could choose the one over the other. So you will get full insights around how the reference architecture would look like, which you could then take with the help of the tool and tailor it to your specific needs and environment.
I can personally confirm that Signavio is really a right tool to work with Enterprise Architecture Framework. And of course, for our listeners, we will put this link to access Signavio into description for this podcast. Right now, I would like to continue a discussion of these cornerstones of enterprise architecture. And the fourth one was about consulting services. So, René, could you bring some light on the concept of predefined enterprise architecture consulting services? What are these services? And for reference, we can discuss this using lead to cash, for example, business area, because it's something which is quite close to my company.
Yeah. So, we have a broad portfolio of services. They span across the entire, let's say, architecture life cycle. So that could start from the assessment of a strategy, breaking down of the strategy. There could be services in the area of business architecture, where we want to define, like I mentioned before, a business capability map. If you take it now from a lead to cash perspective, a lot of companies think more maybe in processes, but they would like also to have a capability model as a common language to get engaged with the stakeholders. So you could start from there and translate, also with the help of the reference architecture, your lead to cash process into capabilities, for example. But we have also additional services like more in the application architecture, where we want to define our target application architecture. Want to understand, okay, what is the current situation in terms of the as-is architecture, and how do we get to the target? So meaning that we will also create a roadmap where we bring in the dimension of time, that we can then also ensure based on business priorities what has to come first, what second, and next. So there are many services which we're offering. And beside that, we also support in defining the architecture governance. So that would be more around how do the internal ways of working look like. If you need, for example, to set up an architecture review board where solution proposals have to pass through in order to get a green light for the implementation. But there could be also very specific services around assessments of current landscapes, for example, in context of intelligent technologies, where could be better support, identifying levels of automation, for example, to see how can we improve situations. So we have quite a broad portfolio, taking different aspects into account. I think the interesting aspect is that this portfolio is modular built, so you can also combine multiple services into one, and you can tailor it to your specific needs at the end.
I know that it's always easier to discuss this topic when we have some visualization. Unfortunately, to our podcast, we can't add any slides. but you still have some blog posts about this topic where well done some schemas and some references that we will also share with our audience in the description. But I would like to ask you, for those who would like to deep dive into Enterprise Architecture Framework, where they can find more information, are there any courses available or maybe some certifications planned?
Yes, so let's first of all share the blog. I've published a blog around the Enterprise Architecture Framework. So the audience, everyone listening now into this podcast, will be able to access the details of what we are discussing, also with some overviews and visuals. And beside that, we are offering a training course, the Intelligent Enterprise Architecture Foundation Training. It's a very intensive 5-day training course where we not only share the, let's say, the theory about the methodology, the reference architecture, the tools, and the services, but also with quite a lot of hands-on activities where you can experience a full engagement cycle, an enterprise architecture engagement cycle, starting with assessing a business strategy down to an actual implementation roadmap. And we have selected a couple of artifacts which are part of our methodology, which you would then exercise and explore with the help of a case study to get really the hands dirty, let's say, and some experience of how to apply the framework as such.
I can comment on this training because I attended it last year, and it was, first of all, well organized in terms of how you conducted it. We had a theoretical part and we had a practical part. Practical part was the most useful because you can not just understand the concept, but you can try it your own. You can try such tools as Signavio, and you can also, in a collaborative way, using such tools as a mural, create some target architecture and use all the knowledge that you received during this training. So we will also share the link. And second thing that could help better to understand what is an enterprise architecture framework, of course, is examples. So could you share any examples where the use of an enterprise architecture framework has successfully guided the roadmap creation process for intelligent technologies? Why I brought here intelligent technologies? Because we know that this year it's something which is hyper demanded from the business. They all listen how these technologies helps to improve their processes, and they started to visualize how to put new solutions, intelligent solutions into their landscape. So how this framework can help?
Yeah, so I think this is a very valid question. I'm also engaged in architecture initiatives with my customers at the moment. So what we would do or how we would go about is at the end, if we talk about intelligent technologies, it's not only about the technology, or it's not for the sake of technology. It's at the end for the sake of the business, yeah? Because we want to improve a specific situation. So think about, we want to improve the level of automation or digitization in a specific area. So what we would do is actually to assess first from a business perspective, what are the priorities, what are the drivers. We would then translate it into business capabilities. So once you have a business capability map, for example, you could then highlight which are the areas of lack of automation, for example, where we do a lot of manual activities, or maybe where are the areas where we want to differentiate in the market with the help of intelligent technologies. And once we have defined that, and still it's solution agnostic, we could then go deeper into the technology aspects to understand what is the art of the possible to improve here the situation. Maybe also deep dive into specific use cases and understand how we could actually bring in more automation, digitization in these areas. For example, then with the help of specific use cases on BTP, or any, let's say, out-of-the-box solutions which are supported or offered by, for example, S4HANA in a specific situation. So this is one example how we could go actually about this by leveraging the framework on the one hand side, but then really narrowing it down in terms of intelligent technologies, but always in a given business context.
I definitely agree that these are technologies and this framework, this is services and tools that support our business strategies, first of all. So this enterprise architecture framework, it supports business to assess their current solutions and provide them some information on what intelligent technology they should add to their landscape to support their business strategical goals. So let's then discuss a real-life successful story that highlights the implementation of the SAP Enterprise Architecture Framework. What was the notable outcomes and benefits they achieved because of adopting the framework? We can not use like specific companies' names, but at least please explain some business strategy goals and how the implementation of enterprise architecture framework helps them.
I think the main outcome or the main motivation of how or why we actually put all the things together is really about the business and the IT alignment. So what we have done with the framework is that we have maybe formalized things which we have already been doing in the past in terms of enterprise architects. But now you have this, let's say, unique combination of the methodology with the reference architecture. So meaning that you have not to search in the internet what kind of solution is proposed, but it speeds up your activity in terms of enterprise architecture a lot because you find curated content of what we from SAP think about what is the future, what is the right solution to be put in place in a given context. So product teams are actually providing this reference content, and you as an architect, you can then reuse whatever is in there. So it also gives you a certain level of investment security because you won't find outdated or old solutions on there. It's up to date and it's also growing over time. We are currently also working on industry specific processes, for example, industry specific solutions, which you would also find in there. So now coming to an example, I mean, not to share the names of customers, but quite often what we see, it could be very traditional architecture engagements, and this is also where we put our focus on, is around the business architecture and also new business models. So with the help of the framework, we are able to assess upcoming business models and then deep dive in the respective areas, like how do we want to engage with our customers in the future? What is the way of how we, for example, sell to our customers? So, for example, moving away from products to services or even to solutions, also giving us the insights with which partner are we working together or need to work together? How do we integrate the partners? And also, how do we cover the financial perspective? So how do we capture value? And we also expanded it to the area of sustainability so that we also get some insights around sustainability aspects. So all of this we can now take into account and then translate it over into our respective target architecture, again, by going through either capabilities or processes. And then with the help of the reference architecture, we are able to define a target landscape, a target architecture, which is future proven and which would operate in the context of this new business model. And finally, we would then conclude with a roadmap to understand, based on the business priorities, where should we start first? What are the important things, maybe also some quick wins to show value to the business, and what should then come next. So with this framework, we are able to tackle, for example, there was now one example out of the customer engagements. a specific upcoming or new business model with a sound way forward how to implement it in terms of IT technology.
Great. It was a really interesting examples. And I liked how you concluded it also with the new business models, that it's not just about in general business strategy, but if some customers, they would like to introduce new models, such as, for example, business as a services or whatever, and they are considering some solutions that they need to add for maintaining this new business process to their landscape, then they definitely can start with using SAP Enterprise Architecture Framework. René, I have additional question in regards of this framework. For whom you would consider it's better to use this framework? Is it mostly consultants who will need to come to the customer side and implement this framework? Or is it possible that IT department from companies, they can train in your program and they can pass certification and then themselves actively use this framework to achieve their business strategy goals?
Yes, so I would argue both groups. So there could be consultants, we would call it SAP partners, for example, but also customers. So everyone who is acting in the role of an enterprise architect is most likely interested in getting to know more about the framework. And what our motivation also was that on the one hand side, we created SAP internally a common framework, which leads to common ways of working. But the idea why we are also sharing this with the outside world, let's say, is that we create a common language and a common ways of working in the market, so that everyone follows the same approach, which will then also ease the interaction either from a consultant with a customer, but also then towards SAP, so that we have a common ground and can easier interact with each other. So therefore, all, let's say, relevant groups should be interested in that framework and potentially also in the training. And you just mentioned one point, and this is actually just hot off the press. It was announced this week. We have now also a certification available. It's for the role of an enterprise architect. So it's a new training format. We are, I would say, we are moving a little bit away from this pure knowledge-based trainings. Once you have done a course, you have then to prove that you have understood what's handled in the course. The enterprise architecture professional certification is more around the role of an enterprise architect. So there's, to a certain extent, there is still some knowledge check in there, but then we have also put a lot of scenarios in place where you have then to answer as an enterprise architect, what would you choose? I mean, how would you approach a certain scenario, a certain situation? So it's more, let's say, experience-based than purely knowledge-based. So quite an interesting certification, I think. And we already got a lot of demand after the announcement. And I think also customers and partners were actually looking for that specific certification program. And now it's live. So please also have a look into that aspect.
I guess after you shared that it will be also very practical oriented, like you need to consider some scenarios and apply during this certification your knowledge into scenarios, and we will have from our audience probably also someone who will be interested to pass this certification. So for those, we will also add a link in our description. Thank you so much to René for being with us today. It was a really pleasure to talk with you about this topic, and also I hope that for our audience this conversation will be very informative and enjoyable the same way as it was for me.
Yeah, thank you, Karina. Thanks a lot for having me. It was also my pleasure to share the insights. And if there are any open questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You will find my contact details either in one of the blogs, or we could also share it as part of the podcast.
Thank you, René. As always, we are just one click away. Please contact us at CLARITY.SHOW. Thank you for listening and see you in the next episode. And don't forget to subscribe just to make sure you don't miss them.